tonight, there are lots of new developments in the Georgia election interference case. Apparently, Donald Trump wants to sever his case. And meanwhile, the legal bills and the pressure are mounting for the other 18 co-defendants. Here with me in the studio to discuss all of this, criminal defense attorney A. Scott Bolden and former federal prosecutor Gene Rossi. Glad to have both of you here with me. Let me begin with this notion that Trump wants to not be with the other 18 people, which is not the most surprising thing if they want to have a speedy trial. He doesn't want to go early. He doesn't want to go in October. Remember, in the January 6th D.C. case, he said, 2026 sounds about right for me. So the idea of severing it, not the most surprising thing, right? But why do you think it's good for the others to do this?
Well, he doesn't want to go at all, first of all.
That's true.
Okay, and the reason he wants to be severed is kind of weird. He's not going to win that motion because he just doesn't want to go on the speedy trial. He does want to go in 2026. Not having Trump there is bad for the prosecution because it's a RICO case, and she wants to tell the whole story. The government prosecutor wants to tell the whole story. It's going to look like when you got 19 defendants, she's going to have to tell the whole story without all of them in one courtroom. It's just not manageable and what have you. But usually you sever a case because one party's defense is adverse to the other. You don't really have that here. He just doesn't want to go within 70 days. And so the other side will tell their defense. But it'll be interesting to see whether these 19 defendants, what their defenses are, and how do they wind up being adverse to one another. Because the two defendants that want to go within 70 days, they're not adverse to...
Sidney Powell.
That's right. Their defenses up to date are not adverse to one another. They just say they didn't have anything to do with it, and they didn't make any affirmative acts, and they didn't commit any predicate crimes, and so forth and so on. It'll be interesting to see what happens, how many hang together, how many plead out, and how many go the distance.
Dominic Pezzola, he was the Proud Boy who smashed the Capitol window to try to gain access for the rioters on January 6th. He has been sentenced to 10 years in prison today. You also have Ethan Nordine, who led a group of 100 Proud Boys to the Capitol on that same day. He got 18 years, gentlemen. And then, listen to this. Here's Nordine on that day with Joseph Biggs, who, by the way, got 17 years. Well, listen to this.
So we just stormed Capitol, took the place back. That was so much fun.
So much America, so much America.
More murders. January 6th will be a day in infamy.
Yes, yes.
You chuckle.
Yeah.
That didn't help him.
It didn't help them, but they didn't anticipate being prosecuted. Nobody got arrested that day. It's a day in infamy. What was interesting about Judge Kelly's sentencing is that the government wanted 27 or 25 to 30 years, and while he agreed that this was a threat and an assault on democracy, there weren't any mass casualties, and he came in the middle. He gave them 17, 18, and 10, depending on who the defendant was. I think that's a fair sentence. That's a lot of time. You know, they got to do 80% of that time, even if they're on good behavior. But I think he struck a real balance. Ultimately, what's going to really happen here for justice to be done for January 6th is that Donald Trump has to be held accountable. That's what the federal case is about and the state case, and he's really the main piece. It was funny you said you needed Donald Trump in your January 6th cases, but he's omnipresent. He's on the news every day. Depending on the jury you pick, you can talk about Donald Trump as bad as you want. I'm not sure he has to be there because he's in our face all the time, sucking up the room. Look for the next argument to be on this motion to sever. There are two other elements of severing under Georgia law, and that is whether the evidence in the law that comes in can be either misapplied or confusing in regard to what law and evidence can be applied to each defendant. That's going to be really important because you've got 19 defendants, you've got several charges. Donald Trump has 13 of them. The judge and the prosecutor are going to have to be really, really good at laying this out and explaining it. I don't tend to like RICO cases in civil or criminal because they're very complicated. And when I've tried them on both sides of the law, you've got to be really detailed and in plain language explain in your closing and your opening what we're doing. It is not an easy case to listen to as a juror, and it is certainly not an easy case to get a conviction or a non-guilty verdict on.